Harish Mehta, who's a founder of NASSCOM, wrote a very impactful and popular book called The Maverick Effect last year before last. He's currently translating that book into several Indian languages, including Gujarati, Marathi, Hindi, etc. So I was having this dinner time conversation with him yesterday, and he expressed his frustration with the GPT-4 and other technologies in translating English into various Indian languages. And I was thinking that it somehow captures our relationship with technology. We look at some technology, we get fascinated by it, we fall in love with it, we find it magical. And yet, 6 months later, we take it for granted, it becomes mundane, and we expect it to do a lot more, and we are sort of disappointed with tech. Right? So, in some ways, all the people in this room are AI evangelists, AI explorers, and you are actually responsible for creating this beautiful AI wave that we are seeing. And if there's one company in this August presence who's actually doing a lot in this space, whether it's investing in OpenAI or whether it is about Azure and Microsoft Cloud Services, or it is about Windows Copilot or Office Copilot, it's Microsoft. And leading the charge from Microsoft, or all these now 40 years, Jean-Philippe Courtois has been leading Microsoft and this revolution for the last 40 years. So I'm very privileged to have you, JP, here in this room. You have seen everything. You have a ringside view of what it is like to see the best and the greatest AI as it is being developed. So from that ringside view, give us a sense for what is the state of play as far as AI is concerned globally.
Well, first of all, really excited to be back in India, Srikanth, with you and all of you in NASSCOM. I've been visiting your countries for the last 30 years of my life, and I'm just amazed of what's going on in India. As you said, I've been privileged to be in tech for 40 years plus now. And I have to go back probably to my early days in the early 80s to be as excited as I am today, Srikanth. I'm talking about the PC burst at the time. Some of you are not born in the room. Was the Apple II, the IBM PC, MS-DOS, and the rest was history. I think today what's going on is both, in a way, a combination of hype, a combination of real capabilities we can touch every day, and also some new advances that are going through technology, society, and business. Just looking at some aspects of that, on the economic side, there's been tons of studies. One from, actually from PwC was talking about the fact that the economic growth will be enabled by AI would generate an additional $16 trillion by 2030, which is like mind-blowing. When you think about jobs, you've probably seen a lot of different studies, contradictory studies as well. The latest one, which was discussed in Davos, was actually a study done by IMF showing that 40% of the job globally will be impacted by AI in a way or another, 60% in most developed countries and 25% in the least developed countries in the world, which is an interesting point I'll come back to later on in terms of skilling and what does it mean actually depending where you are in the world. I think the third arena is really about responsible innovation. I'm sure you had a lot of debates here at NASSCOM with what is it we should do as a society, what is it we should do with governments. And I must say, in my 40 years plus in tech, I've never seen governments moving so fast in some parts of the world, particularly in my home country in France and Europe, where we have already some very well rigid defined policies to go after. But the last point I want to make is it's about innovation in the hands of our customers. And so just to share with you some excitement we said Microsoft across the world. Number one, we see our customers starting to embrace copilots to truly understand how much is going to move the needle on their productivity. So we have, large consulting companies like EY, PwC making big, actually, adoption plans of copilots, and for some of them measuring up to 30–40% productivity gains. Then you get into process automation. You get companies like Schneider Electric that has been developing basically a custom copilot to automate all the customer service process. Then you get into engineering services with companies like Siemens using, again, custom LLMs to build engineering automation services. And then you get into innovation. In innovation, you have a company like TomTom, well-known, company in terms of navigation systems for cars, using the power, again, of AI to really help the drivers and people in the cars to have a conversation with their cars on obviously both the direction, but also entertainment and more. So all in all, it's an incredibly exciting world happening and developing with AI, which is being shaped very differently depending where you live in the world.
I think many of the people in the room will believe that AI is the new electricity. And that's what Andrew Ng said, I think, a couple of years back. And it's kind of stuck with all of us. Now, if that is the case, I think AI, you should be able to tap into this AI, plug your machine into that socket called AI, and out should flow like electricity, like electric current. We should have intelligence flow through the system, and it should power every decision. It should make every product, service, or process smarter. Right? Having said that, it seems like since that promise has been there, it's been very exciting for the last few years to think about that and sort of bring that to reality. There have been some key bottlenecks that have come. Chiefly, one is privacy. There's a lot of conversation going on that topic. There's safety, there's security,
yep,
and there's compliance and copyright, and these kinds of issues have all come in and actually stopped some of the progress from happening, and for the right reasons, because we do want AI systems to be safe and secure and private and the whole idea of responsible AI. From the time last year when this excitement was at the peak to today, some of these issues seem to have been resolved. Players like Microsoft have done some really good work in this space. I would love to understand from your vantage point, what changes are you seeing, and what is the state of adoption of AI inside big enterprises, Fortune 100 enterprises?
Yeah, I think you're right, Srikanth, in terms of policies, in terms also of compliance processes. When it comes to business adoption, it's actually something super important. As a company, we've been really collaborating to the broad discussion, and we've been coming up with those 5 core principles, which is a combination, again, of privacy and security. It's also about fairness. It's also about inclusion, transparency, and accountability. And so when we talk about responsible AI, we don't just mean policies that need to happen at the societal level of governments, but they need to happen at the company level, because at the end of the day, we believe that every company in this room will become an AI company. And so what it means that you're going to develop your own AI models. You're going to develop your own AI LLMs. And it means that you need to actually bring the methodologies into your dev teams to drive responsible AI. So this is something we've been practicing as a company ourselves, because we have like 120,000 engineers at Microsoft coding every day on AI. So we better do something about it. So we've developed, this notion of a responsible AI office, which is a team composed both of not just policymakers, but actually our top engineers, sociologists as well, and that has developed some principles for all of our development teams when it comes to applying those 5 principles I was talking about. So it has translated into actually APIs, into libraries, into development tools that we're also sharing with our customers and clients to make sure that as they implement their own AI models, they can do it actually in a very responsible way. So to us, this is a very important issue. And we see, again, this, I would say also this privacy discussion evolving differently in the world. As a company, we made a very strong statement already early on, about a couple of years ago, saying your data are your data. So it means that whenever you are using Microsoft AI stack to basically create your own algorithms, the way you're going to enrich your own data using algorithm, Microsoft Azure platform, at the end of the day, is going to be your own IP and property forever. We are not going to use any of that as a company to enrich your own algorithm at all. So we are making some very strong commitments in our contractual, actually, agreements with our clients across the world. I think this is where we see a lot of customers starting to get a lot more intentional because they see they can become themselves AI companies.
Now, I think we've touched upon two themes. One is productivity. You mentioned productivity, and I'm going to visit that in a minute. And we also talked about this intelligence explosion that's happening with everything becoming smarter. I also see user interfaces and just the user experience getting much, much better, because we've had clunky UI, UX of technology throughout the last 50 odd years of tech progress. And generative AI seems to be that beautiful interface layer as well. Now, revisiting the productivity point, one of the things, it's the elephant in the room, I would say. There are 6 billion people in India, by some counts, and maybe even higher, who write code for a living in India.
Yeah.
And we know that all these coding assistants can dramatically accelerate productivity on coding. So it could be writing code. I think nobody's writing code anymore, from what I can tell. I've done a lot of surveys. No self-respecting tech person wants to write that code if they can use AI to generate that code. Number one. Secondly, debugging code.
Yeah.
3, documentation. I think no tech person wants to do documentation. So the documentation, and then generating unit test cases and so on. So this whole software development lifecycle is dramatically influenced by these coding assistants. So where does that place India? Because if India is producing tech labor for the world, very, very talented though, right? Still producing tech labor for the world. And if the need for labor actually comes down, what do you expect to happen? And how should the Indian tech industry play for it?
I think it's a super question. I think in many ways, and again, coming to India for so many years, I think it's a defining moment for India, precisely because of that unique capability you have as a country with 6 million coders and more to come, by the way. Our belief is society and economy are going to need a lot more coders. So I think that's the good news. Not less, because more productivity, but actually more, because AI development is going to become more of not a mundane skill, but something that needs to be of abundance. When you think about India, this is already the number 2 country in terms of developers right after the US, and I think predictions show that India should cross the US by 2028, which is the largest, clearly, number of developers. When we think about what's going on with GitHub was actually our very first copilot, as you know, as a company. We started that more than 2 years ago. So we learned a ton with developers because, well, this is the core of our company, by the way, developers. And we've learned a ton in terms of what it means to our own developers. And exactly as you said, some of the areas where a number of developers don't necessarily like or enjoy, or where they could be more productive at. And in many ways, what we see happening remind me of a recent study I saw, actually, which is very interesting. It's a study that was done by the National Economics Bureau Research. And it's talking about generative AI, patterns. And their prediction, so, bear with me, is that when you look at Gen AI today, what it does, it is using some of the most advanced capabilities and behaviors of the most productive workers. So when you think about developers, they will look at the most gifted, more talented, more experienced developers. They will learn from their practices, and then they will apply that into their capabilities. And you see the same happening in some of the firms. I was discussing with a client in the UK just a couple of weeks ago with one of the biggest legal firms. It was very interesting because they were actually testing our copilots and GitHub as well. But copilots for lawyers, right? Because they don't develop code, but they develop a lot of policies, documents, and regulation more. And the very first takeaways from this company was the following. They have a lot of junior lawyers coming out of legal schools who are accelerating their learning curve in an incredible way. So they can already foresee a different pyramid of age and pyramid of skills in their firm because of that. And so if you believe again that paper that came out of National Bureau of Economics Research, you could believe maybe that AI is going to be the great equalizer. And if that's the case, I think there's one country in the world where AI could be the best equalizer, that's India. And particularly in a developer's world. So that's why I'm actually very optimistic myself, overall, I would say for AI adoption, but in particular for India, because you can truly crack and use the power of that democratization effect to enable the 6 million of coders and all this new generation to come through and become the global, kind of hub for those AI talents. And this is the reason why we made some announcements. Satya was here just a couple of weeks ago, and we made some big announcement about going and skilling 2 million developers in India, and going super deep as well in terms of in-depth developers, but also democratizing AI skills for the broader masses. So all in all, we believe this is a real opportunity for AI to broaden actually the developers' workforce.
Two things I'm picking up. One is that you're making the claim that the number of developers required is actually going to go up, even though productivity will dramatically improve.
Yes.
The need will go up so much that it will be okay, number one. And number two, I think what you're saying is it's democratizing in the sense that a below average coder could become an average coder could become a top coder, and a top
Correct.
coder maybe 10x better than where she or he was before. And similarly, it's true for even a radiologist. And if any augmented AI system can improve the average, bring a below average radiologist to an average radiologist and an average radiologist to a top radiologist. So those are the two things I'm picking up from what you were referring. And you feel like, I think it's a huge opportunity for India.
I do believe so, Srikanth, and we can already see some signs of that actually. On GitHub in India, is this actually mushroom development happening on healthcare. And on GitHub, there's a huge repository of Indian developers who've been developing this open healthcare network. And in essence, it's about really providing very advanced healthcare capabilities that could enable actually other countries in the world, by the way, to do remote diagnostic, to do remote care. So I believe it could open doors to some pretty amazing scenarios for economic development of India.
I'm now going to put you in a spot, right? Because I would like you to be a prime minister for a day, or maybe for the next 5 minutes.
Wow.
If you were prime minister of India for a day, and let me set the context. It's been often discussed that AI is so important that it's actually countries that win the race for AI are going to conquer the world. People like Putin have made that kind of statement. And we also know that this is a matter that is being at the highest levels of government, whether it's India or around the world. People are seeing this as a very pivotal point too, and they want their countries to be competitive as this AI explosion happens. So if you were the Prime Minister of India for a day, what would you do to make India competitive and win the race for AI?
Obviously, it's a huge question. Would dare being a prime minister for 2 minutes, Srikanth, not even a day? I would start with, I would really focus on a few things. One, I would be very pragmatic when it comes to AI regulation. As I've said, I've never seen my 40 years in tech so much actually push from governments across the world, in the US, in Asia as well, in Europe. We have already what is called Data and AI Act, which has been signed off, which I've never seen in my life so quickly.
Yes.
And in a way, I think it's too quick, too fast. So if I may, my advice would be flexible enough. Number one, to certainly safeguard the biggest risks that could happen with AI, because there are some real risks that need to be taken care of, and governments have to regulate that. But number two, at the same time, make sure that you don't get so precise early on, because when you see the latest development, just last week, what was just announced, right? Text to video, millions tokens, context window, and more to come, by the way, in the coming weeks. You shouldn't rush. My second advice is based on the discussion we had before. I think for India, strategically, given the country's demographics, youth, and so on, the ability you have to basically out-innovate from an education standpoint to truly democratize AI across not just STEM, but education system in India could be incredibly powerful. so that you can really tap into the 6 million plus, maybe tomorrow 60 million coders in India. If I push forward the agenda in 10 years, it would not surprise me. That would be a huge muscle for India. And I think the third one, which I believe I see emerging in India more and more, is the ability for India to innovate with a new generation of startups. And generation of startups which are both relevant for India, but also for the world. And in particular, I would tell you, because something that is of passion for me as well, I believe that India might surprise the world when it comes to climate tech, green tech, sustainability initiative, and more. So I believe this is potentially a very unique spot where there's so much happening in the country that having the best minds, the best tech ecosystem, and the best policies together could truly drive a new generation of entrepreneurs who will make a huge impact globally, not just in India. So it will be my 2-minute speech.
Thank you for doing the world's toughest job for the last 3 minutes. It's been a fascinating conversation, JP. Do we have time for one question? Maybe I'll take just one question from the audience. Anyone who has, okay, gentleman there. Anyone can get a camera across? Sorry, mic across, not camera. Do we have a mic? Any chance?
See a mic at the bottom? No.
All right.
I'm not sure we have a mic, so it'll be hard.
Yeah,
oh,
yes,
yeah.
There you go. If you could just stand up, then she can spot you. Yes, please. Thanks.
Thanks, JP, for a very interesting session.
We can't hear
Yes,
you.
Yes, sir.
we can
Yeah.
hear you.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, JP, for a really interesting session. One thing you mentioned is the ability of generative AI to raise the level, raise the quality, raise the skill set of people, right? I know it was also mentioned, I think Mustafa mentioned earlier in the morning, about the scope of generative AI in education, right?
Sorry, we're not able to pick it up.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Very often.
Is this slightly better?
Yeah, we may have to slow down because we have.
Okay, all right. Anyway, so my question is, do you see a danger in too much reliance on generative AI for the purpose of learning, right? Because, dropping quality of output, inability to think, inability to creatively come up with solutions, right? And just relying too much on the tools.
So the question is,
Too much reliance
yes,
on
we talked about
AI for
skilling,
learning.
AI and skilling, and is there too much reliance on AI? Is that good for us, or is that?
I think it's a great question, and I'm also very passionate in terms of education, adoption of AI. And when you look at some developments like the Srikanth Academy as an example, which is a very public example of AI adoption, I think you see a few interesting promises. One, it's about equipping teachers, professors, instructors to get smarter, to get more accurate, to be more precise on their learning plans. And the other side is actually about enabling and actually reinforcing the learning appetite of the learners. So I believe it's going to take those two parties to tango to truly emulate that learning appetite so that it's not just, of course, knowledge you can access and you never really digest. And this is the reason why actually there's a lot of a lot of projections in terms of education skills and skills for the economy, which are betting a lot more on emotional intelligence from people, as opposed just to hard skills. I'm not telling you hard skills, engineering skills are over, not at all. But in many ways, coming back to the same discussion we have with developers, with you, Srikanth, we believe that developers will become a lot more, in a way, each one of developers will become much more like a project lead, orchestrating AI agents and learning from them in a way they can collaborate with others. So to me, there will be a lot more to be done in terms of enabling, basically self-awareness, social awareness, collaboration, empathy, to make sure that people actually use that base knowledge coming to them to learn more working with others. So that's an optimistic view of the world, obviously, which is mine. So I believe there's an opportunity for us to actually raise the bar on human ingenuity and not make us more complacent, not make us lazy, which I think was part of potentially the question you asked. So that's at least my view as of today.
So one way to summarize what we've discussed is also that there will never be enough supply of great coders. There will never be enough supply of great teachers. There will never be enough supply of radiologists. And if all of those can get better, I think we'll be in a much better world overall. So thank you, JP, for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.